$11 billion. That's not a typo. That is how much money the global paleo food market was worth in 2024, and it's growing, projected to hit $21 billion by 2035. $11 billion built entirely on one idea. One very clean, very simple, incredibly confident idea. Eat like a caveman, and you'll feel like a caveman. Not the dying at 30 part, the lean. Muscular, no body fat, running down prey on the open savanna part, obviously. You've seen it. Maybe you've done it. No grains, no dairy, no legumes, no processed sugar, lots of meat, lots of fat, lots of things that were theoretically available to a prehistoric hunter standing in a field somewhere between 2 and 50,000 years ago. The logic is extremely clean. Humans evolved eating one way for millions of years. Then agriculture happened, then industrialization, then ultra-processed everything. Your body never caught up. Your genes are still running on ancient software. So go back to the original diet, and your body will finally make sense again. Lose weight, fix your gut, feel incredible, all by returning to the thing your biology was actually built for. And here's the genius of it. It sounds irrefutable, because it is built on a real insight. Agricultural and industrial diets genuinely did introduce foods the human body wasn't fully adapted to. There's real science behind the broad premise. Researchers at universities take this seriously. The logic is not absurd. It is genuinely compelling. And when you try it and you lose 15 pounds in 2 months, the theory feels confirmed. You feel like you found the answer, like everyone else is eating wrong and you finally cracked it. $11 billion, counting. There is only one problem. A fairly significant one. The diet is built on assumptions about what ancient humans actually ate. Those assumptions came from archaeological sites. And there is one thing those sites were almost entirely missing that nobody thought to ask about for a very long time. We'll get there, but first, drop a comment if you've ever tried paleo, keto, or any version of eat like your ancestors. I want to know how it went, and you're going to want to be in the comments for what comes next. Here's how the reasoning worked. You're an archaeologist. You're excavating a prehistoric site. What do you find? Bones, lots and lots of bones. Animal bones. Bones with cut marks from stone tools where the meat was removed. Bones with impact fractures where marrow was extracted. Bones everywhere. You find projectile points, spearheads, arrowheads, tools designed specifically for hunting large animals. You find butchering sites where large game was processed. You find evidence of fire used to cook meat. And you reasonably, logically, scientifically conclude these people were hunters. They lived on animal protein. Their diet was meat-heavy. The evidence is right in front of you. Except, the evidence is not right in front of you. Half of it isn't. More than half of it isn't. Because there is a word archaeologists use for what happens to organic material over thousands of years in the ground. That word is taphonomy. And what taphonomy tells you is devastatingly simple. Bones survive. They have a dense mineral matrix. They last. Plants don't. Cellulose breaks down. Organic matter decomposes, roots rot, seeds disintegrate, bark crumbles. The acorns somebody ate for dinner 15,000 years ago are gone. The tubers somebody boiled and mashed 8,000 years ago are gone. The wild grasses somebody ground into flour 30,000 years ago are almost gone. The Expedition Journal at Penn Museum published it directly. Archaeologists were misled into believing that early humans relied heavily on meat foods, because bones, the remains of edible animals, survive far better than the remains of plant foods. We built an entire multi-billion-dollar dietary industry on the food that happened to fossilize well. We looked at what survived and assumed it was everything. The plants were there. They were probably the majority. We just couldn't see them. And the paleo diet's entire intellectual foundation rests on that invisible half. Not existing. Now, let's talk about what the bones that did survive are actually telling us. Because here's the thing. There is a type of bone that contains the actual dietary record of the person it belonged to. Not animal bones, human bones. Specifically, the isotope ratios locked inside human collagen, carbon-13 and nitrogen-15 ratios, shift measurably depending on what a person ate. C3 plants leave a different chemical signature than animal protein. Marine foods leave a different signature than terrestrial ones. Strontium isotopes in tooth enamel record the landscape you grew up in. Zinc isotopes track your trophic position, where you sat on the food chain. And the isotope signature cannot decompose. It's locked into the mineral matrix of the bone. It survives thousands of years, and if you read it carefully enough, it tells you exactly what that person was eating. In April 2024, a team from Géosciences Environnement Toulouse, the Max Planck Institute, and the Université Toulouse III, led by researcher Clairvia Jaouen, published a study in Nature, Ecology, and Evolution. They analyzed human and faunal remains from Taforalt cave in Morocco, dated between 15,000 and 13,000 years before present. Pre-agricultural hunter-gatherers, no farming, no domesticated crops. These were the people the paleo diet is based on. And the results, in the researchers' own words, unequivocally demonstrated a substantial plant-based component in the diets of these hunter-gatherers. Not suggested, not implied, unequivocally demonstrated. This was described by co-author Zhao Wen as likely the first time such a significant plant-based component in a Paleolithic diet has been documented using isotope techniques. From Taforalt, from the exact type of population the paleo diet says was primarily eating meat. But let's go further, because Taforalt is not the only dataset that changes this story. In January 2024, PLOS published research by Jennifer Chen, PhD student at Penn State, and her team from UC Davis. They used stable carbon and nitrogen isotope analysis on 24 individuals from 2 Peruvian Andean highland sites, Willamaya Pachca and Soromikaya Pachca, dated between 9,000 and 6,500 years. These sites had previously been studied and concluded to be dominated by large mammal hunting, lots of animal bones, lots of projectile points. Classic paleo diet poster population. And then Chen's team ran the actual isotope chemistry of the human skeletons themselves. Plants made up 70 to 95% of the average diet. The median across all models showed C3 plant consumption between 70 and 95%. Mammal protein was 3 to 23%. These people were not primarily hunters, they were primarily foragers. Wild tubers, ancestors of the potato, were the main dietary staple. The hunting evidence was real. The hunting was also a side dish. Randy Haas of UC Davis, senior author on the study, stated directly that archaeological biases have long misled archaeologists, including himself, and that it was likely archaeologists had gotten it wrong elsewhere too. The person who built their career on this population admitted the population's diet was the opposite of what the evidence seemed to show. Comment, I never knew below. If this is the first time you've heard any of this, because what comes next is genuinely worse for the industry. Here is what the paleo diet specifically tells you not to eat. Grains. The paleo principle is that grains are a post-agricultural food. Bread, pasta, porridge, flour products, all banned. Because cavemen didn't eat grain, they didn't have agriculture, they didn't process starchy foods. They ate meat and plants and nuts and berries. Not grain, not flour. That's the whole principle. No carbs from processed sources. Certainly no flour. At 3 separate Upper Paleolithic sites across Europe, Bilancino 2 in Italy, Kostenki 16 in Russia, and Pavlov 1 in the Czech Republic, researchers recovered grindstones. Not unusual, grindstones are commonly found. What was unusual is what the team from the University of Florence and the Max Planck Institute found when they analyzed the residue on those grindstones under microscopy. Starch grains, specifically, starch from cattail roots, from fern roots, from wild grain. The study was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in November 2010. The grindstones were 30,000 years old. Stone Age people were grinding plant material into flour 30,000 years ago. Not occasionally. The starch evidence is consistent with routine processing. The Gravettian hunter-gatherers of Upper Paleolithic Europe were regularly grinding starchy plants into flour and cooking the results. 20,000 years before agriculture, 20,000 years before the thing the paleo diet claims invented carbs, cavemen were making flour, the no-grain people were making grain products from grain. But we are not done. We are not even close to done, because we have to talk about the teeth. And the teeth are where the paleo diet goes from inconveniently wrong to almost comically wrong. In 2014, a team from Oxford University, the Natural History Museum London, and the National Institute of Archaeological Sciences and Heritage in Morocco published research in PNAS. Lead researcher Dr. Louise Humphrey, human origins scientist at the Natural History Museum, they analyzed 52 sets of adult teeth from human skeletal remains at Taforalt Cave, same cave as the 2024 Isotope study. Hunter-gatherers, 15,000 to 13,700 years ago. Pre-agricultural, the people the paleo diet is literally named after. 51.2% cavity prevalence. Cavities in 51.2% of surviving teeth. Only 3 of the 52 individuals showed 0 signs of dental decay. Dr. Humphrey stated directly that a reliance on edible acorns could account for the high prevalence of cavities, since eating fermentable carbohydrates is a key factor in the initiation and progression of this disease. So the acorns may have been boiled or 3 ground to make flour, and those abrasive particles from grindstones contributed to rapid tooth wear so that caries started to form on the roots. Hunter-gatherers, eating fermentable carbohydrate staples, getting cavities at rates comparable to modern industrialized populations. Not because of agriculture, not because of processed food, Because of wild starchy plants, they were eating constantly because wild starchy plants were available, filling, calorie-dense, and easy to process with a grindstone. The paleo diet's core argument is that grains and carbs are the reason modern humans have dental problems. The populations the paleo diet is based on had more cavities than many modern populations. From eating wild starchy carbs, the caveman you are imitating had worse teeth than you. From eating exactly the category of food you stopped eating to imitate him. Let's now talk about what the paleo diet is actually selling. At any grocery store in the Western world, you can now buy paleo protein bars, paleo granola, paleo trail mix, paleo certified almond flour cookies, paleo snacks packaged in Mylar bags with QR codes and macronutrient labels. There are paleo meal delivery services, paleo recipe apps, paleo influencers with 8-figure supplement businesses. All of it built on the image of a lean, self-sufficient, prehistoric human eating clean, natural, meat-forward food in perfect harmony with their biology. A person who never saw a processed carbohydrate, who never touched a grain, whose teeth were pristine because grains hadn't been invented yet, whose body was strong because they ate steak instead of bread. That person did not exist in the way the industry describes them. The actual prehistoric human at Taforalt had a 51.2% cavity rate from their carb-heavy wild plant diet. The actual prehistoric human in the Peruvian Andes was getting 70 to 95% of their calories from wild tubers. The actual prehistoric human at Bilancino II in Italy 30,000 years ago was grinding cattail root into flour on a stone grindstone and cooking the result. The evidence was in the human bones the whole time. We just assumed the animal bones were the whole story. They weren't. They were the half that survived. Here is the genuinely important thing that gets lost in all of this. The broad insight behind the paleo diet is not wrong. Industrial ultra-processed food is genuinely bad for you. Refined sugar is genuinely bad for you. Highly processed seed oils, artificial additives, refined grains stripped of their fiber, real problems. Eating more whole foods, more vegetables, more quality protein, fewer packages with 17 ingredients you can't pronounce. Genuinely beneficial. There is real health science in the direction the paleo movement is pointing. That part is not the problem. The problem is specific. The problem is that the intellectual justification, eat this because it's what ancient humans ate, is built on a selective reading of a selective record. A reading that favored what survived. A reading that overrepresented the bones and underrepresented everything that had rotted away thousands of years before we arrived to look. The ancestral diet that the $11.8 billion industry is selling you a version of appears to have included a lot of wild plants, a lot of starchy tubers, a lot of ground roots processed with rocks, and a 51% cavity rate from eating fermentable carbohydrates at every available opportunity. It was not primarily meat. It was not grain-free. It was not anything like what the industry told you. Your caveman ancestor was sitting in a cave 15,000 years ago with a toothache from all the wild acorns and starchy plants he'd been grinding and cooking and eating every single day of his difficult, short, nutritionally complex life. And somewhere in the 21st century, someone looked at the bones that survived from that life, decided he must have mostly eaten meat, and started charging you $12 for a paleo protein bar. The caveman would have absolutely eaten the protein bar, by the way. He would have eaten anything. That's kind of the whole point. He would have eat like your ancestors. Does this change how you think about the paleo diet, or any eat like your ancestors claim? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more moments where the billion-dollar answer turns out to be built on the half of the evidence that happened to survive, you know exactly what to do.